Hey guys, welcome to ESO Vault. I'm Centurion, and today I've got a Magicka Nightblade for you. Wraith is a dual wield and bow mag blade, which is quite a bit different from the previous couple of builds. This is the most hybridized build I'm currently playing, probably the most hybrid build I've ever done actually. I'll start out by saying my audience for these videos is not players with a ton of experience in the game. You'll get a lot more out of this if you're new to the game, or maybe you've been in the game a while but you haven't played a Nightblade. Wraith is a Nightblade build that you can play as a beginner. The gear is pretty easy to get. And this is an off-meta fun build that definitely plays like what you would expect a Nightblade vampire to play like. I want to stress that even though this build has a distinct roleplay flavor to it, it's still very capable. You can take this anywhere you want to go in PvE, excluding arenas. I want to exclude arena play because a lot of builds are coming out right now that are designed for the Endless Archive. And arena builds are highly specialized builds. This isn't one of those. Just like you need a different build to PvP, arenas require their own very different setups. Okay, let's take a look at the Magicka Nightblade Wraith. My version of this character is a vampire, but that's a part of the build you can opt out of if you want. I like it because as a stage 4 vampire, sprinting uses only half the stamina that it normally would, and that really helps out a lot with characters that don't regenerate stamina very quickly. I also get the Undeath Vampire passive, which makes the character hard to kill. On the downside, skill cost and fire damage are increased. Now I've run most of the difficult dungeons with this character and didn't have any real sustain issues. A heavy attack on either bar occasionally makes sure I stay out of trouble with my stamina. Fire damage is offset by this character being a Dark Elf, which has natural resistance to fire. Yeah, I know, I play a lot of Dark Elves. Over on the left side of the character sheet, you can see I've got 64 points in Magicka. On the right, if you look at the recovery numbers, Magicka and stamina recovery are pretty close to each other. Other than skill selection, that's really the main thing that would indicate that this is a hybrid setup. There's really nothing else here that's any different than any other setup. Now, since I'm drawing from both stat pools pretty heavily, my total recovery is basically the two added together. So theoretically, I have 2,200 points of recovery. That sounds a lot better than 1,200 or 1,000. My stats are getting a boost here from Ghastly Eyeball as my food. I'm also running potions of spell power. My Mundus Stone is the Thief for extra critical chance. Before I talk about the skills, I want to mention that this is a traditional 2-bar setup, which is what I personally prefer to play. A lot of players find the 2-bar setups don't work for them. This can be for a variety of reasons. Some players just don't want to play that way. They find the 2-bar builds to be kind of distracting, and they don't want to be mashing buttons all the time. Players may have handicaps that can make 2-bar setups difficult or even impossible for them to play. Fortunately these days, the game accommodates those players with simplified 1-bar setups. If you're interested in 1-bar builds, they're all over YouTube. Any search will turn up more than you or I have time to watch. Also, I'd be happy to point you in the right direction if you let me know in the comments. Okay, back to my particular niche, which is slightly simplified 2-bar builds. That simplification takes the form of static rotations and usually, but not always, simplified gear. I'll start on the back bar, as always. I cast Dark Shade first, then Twisting Path. These are both in your class skills kit. Now right here is maybe the only tricky part of this rotation. You want to make sure you're standing inside the area of Twisting Path to get the buffs. So try to pay attention to where you put that down, because it can be difficult to see. After that, I use 2 area attacks, Razor Caltrops from the Assault skill line, and Endless Hail from the Bow skill line. I can use my ultimate if it's available. My ultimate is Ice Comment from the Mage's Guild skill line, and that's currently regarded as the strongest ultimate in the game. My heal, if I need it, is another class skill, Shrewd Offering. Switching to the other bar, I use my Gap Closer Ambush. Ambush applies minor vulnerability to the target and gives me minor berserk. These combine for an extra 10% damage, so try not to leave this skill out. Once I've closed the gap, if there is any, I lay down Barb Trap and cast Deadly Cloak. Barb Trap gives me the minor force buff, and Deadly Cloak reduces the damage I take from AoEs. On top of that, Deadly Cloak does a lot of damage to enemies. If you're doing a dual wield build, you want to always include this skill if you can. The rest of the rotation is simple. You're going to use your spammable concealed weapon 7 times. Now if you're standing in the area of Twisting Path like I told you to, Your first cast of Concealed Weapon will give you the major Berserk buff, increasing your damage by 10%. You also get Minor Expedition, and attacking enemies from the flank sets them off balance, increasing your damage again. Concealed Weapon uses Magicka, and that's the main reason to run a Magblade. The stamina morph of Concealed Weapon isn't nearly as good. I said the rotation was simple here, but I lied. That's because anytime Merciless Resolve is ready to fire, you're going to substitute that for Concealed Weapon. If your light attack weaving is decent, you can use Merciless Resolve twice while you're on this bar. No? Don't worry, I wind up using it just once a lot of the time. That leaves Flawless Dawnbreaker from the Fighters Guild as a passive weapon damage boost and a quickie ultimate for when Ice Comet isn't ready. And now it's time for my favorite living target dummy, Nomeg Ryan. Nomeg Ryan was actually pretty hard to find during the Witches Festival recently. It seems like every player in the game was beating Plunder Skulls out of him 24/7. But he's back and ready to sacrifice himself for the greater good. You may notice here that when I use Merciless Resolve, it also gives me a big heal. That can be handy in tough fights. How do you feel about the crows? That comes from one of the sets I'm wearing, and it's a part of my vampire mojo. Traditionally in books and movies, crows are harbingers of evil. I've kind of decided that I'm a good vampire, but I still like the crows. I have a confession to make. I'm not actually counting how many times I've used my spammable. I'm just keeping my eye on that moving bar, which comes from the Buff Timers add-on. I obviously play on PC, and you should too if you can. Add-ons can only be used by PC players, and they improve your quality of life in the game dramatically. Now, since the addition of timers to the game itself, you can do something similar without add-ons, but you'll have to keep your eye on tiny numbers instead of a great big bar. Speaking of add-ons, I'm using combat metrics to show the damage from the fight, which came in right around 40,000 points per second. That's shown on the left next to the boss's name in red. If my light attack weaving and my connection were better, that number would be higher, but I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. 40,000 points of damage can get me anywhere I want to go in the game, and if the truth be known, a lot less than that would get the job done. And now, finally, we've arrived at the highly anticipated gear section where secret gear that gives you massive damage is revealed. Seriously though, there's nothing secret about this gear. I would say it's more like both of my 5-piece sets fly pretty low under the game's collective radar. The first of these sets is Claw of the Forest Wraith. Forest Wraith adds a tremendous amount of crit to your class skills, so if you find yourself with a build, like this one, that leans heavily into class skills, this may work for you. Forest Wraith is a crafted set that comes from the Fire Song DLC. Now you already saw the crows. The crows are spawned by the Unfathomable Darkness set, and that's an overland set from the Clockwork City. The crows will peck at enemies for 12 out of every 15 seconds, and I've got that on both bars here, so it just procs away at will. The jewelry is cut off at the bottom, and I think I'm running the infused trait on those with weapon damage enchantments. Bloodthirsty would be the preferred trait, but I've had these pieces quite a while and I've never bothered to change them. I've got a couple Forest Wraith daggers I made. The traits are precise, and I have flame damage and poison enchantments on those. Now you're going to see a lot of builds where the second dagger has a trait other than precise. Do yourself a favor, run precise on both. There's no way in hell you're going to hit the crit cap running with random groups. On my back bar I've got a Maelstrom bow with the infused trait and a weapon damage enchantment. If you don't have the Maelstrom bow, use Unfathomable Darkness here. That back bars well, and then you can run a mythic item if you want. Your call. The monster helm is Stormfist, which does good damage and helps with stamina recovery. Always a solid choice. You see some stuff here is gold and some is purple. Gold your weapons if you can. You'll get the most mileage out of that. All this gear is medium. A piece or two of light gear wouldn't hurt. Just watch your stamina recovery. All the body pieces are divines, and they're evenly split between stamina and Magicka enchantments. And that's another way this build is a hybrid. Most builds, it's all one or the other. Alright, that's it for the gear. Gear is independent of skills and rotation here, so you could drop in other gear if you want. But this stuff is pretty easy to get, if you do crafting, that is. If you're new to the game, I highly recommend that you level crafting. A quick word on champion points will wrap this up, I think. The blue slottables are Fighting Finesse, Master at Arms, Deadly Aim, and Wrathful Strikes. I like to stay away from Backstabber because if you can't get behind the target, that one gives you nothing. Food for thought. Well, that's all I have for you on today's build, Wraith. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see more content like this, please like the video and subscribe. I'm Centurion, and you've been watching ESO Vault. Have a great day and enjoy your adventures in Tamriel.